Hello. We are discussing about the various functions of management, how management has grown as a field of interest, field of concern, and then we also looked at the organization and various systems and subsystems of the organization in terms of the technology, structure, processes, culture. Then we also looked at how organizations have to change in order to meet the expectations within the organization as well as changing circumstances external to the organization. In that respect, we also examine the behaviors at the group level and how to understand the given group behavior. We also looked at problem solving, creativity, and conflict resolution. Another important aspect one need to understand as a part of the management functioning and increasing effectiveness at the individual level as well as at the organizational level is to manage stress. Understanding stress and dealing with stress at the workplace is an important skill of the manager in order to be effective at the interpersonal level, with respect to the intra-group level, as well as at the different levels of the organization. Managers need to understand the nature of stress as well as cope with this stress. So what I intend to do in this stress management presentations, in this lecture you must understand the following things: the concept and definition of stress, and the nature of stress, also the different stages of stress and the symptoms of stress. Now we must analyze and get to the analyze all this. Also further is the types of stressors and eliminating the stressor, and then we will also see the Yerkes-Dodson principle. We will see the job and work stress and elaborate on some of the principles of managing stress, and in the next lecture I should be able to cover the remaining dimensions of the stress management at the basic level. As we start thinking about the stress, one can define in different ways, but stress is common. Stress is the regular part of any existence. It is part of the organizational life. So according to McGrath, a person experiences stress when a situation is perceived as presenting a demand which threatens to exceed the person's capabilities and resources for meeting it. See, if you look at this definition, so that means there is always an attempt to cope in terms of one's own capabilities, one's own resources, and then that the individual finds it difficult because there is not enough resources within the person, within the reach of the person, and that's the time where the individual feels incapable of handling the situation, and that's the time where the person experiences the stress. So it is basically the human experience related to a situation and also related to the perception with respect to what is that one can do and what is that the situation demands, and there is a kind of a gap where the individual feels helplessness. I think this is one view of the, so that means what we are talking about is stress occurs when the pressure is greater than the resource. So it is definitely the one need to understand what kind of pressures one has, what kind of resources also one has to deal with those things. So people use the word time pressure. People talk about that I have too many things to do, so there is a kind of a work pressure, or the too many things to do with a very short period of time. Then you are talking about the task as well as the time. Sometimes it is the interpersonal. So the stress can arise in number of ways, and some people feel yes, if it comes from the subordinates, they are easy to cope with, but when it comes from the boss or people with significant position in the organization, when they react and the individual feels that he or she cannot cope with those expectations or the statement, the individual would feel that stress. Look at how the Lazarus has defined. Lazarus defines stress as a general class of problems which deal with demands, now taxing the physiological, social and psychological systems and the response of these systems. I think the word here is the taxing. See, the taxing means it is again what we saw, the kind of a pressure on the physiological, social and psychological systems. We will elaborate on these three classes of systems, but then and the response of these systems, that means when it is put on pressure, sometimes it is physiological stress, sometimes it is the social stress, another time it is, we can classify it as psychological stress, sometimes it is psycho-social kind of a stress. So, it is in terms of the how the system is able to deal with or cope with, but the taxing is the key word, it puts that kind of a pressure on the individual. Cooper and Marshall visualize stress as characteristic of both the focal individual and his environment. So, that is individual in relation to the significant others, significant things happening around him, sometimes same event people are able to deal with, sometimes same situation people fail to cope with. So, that means it is basically the individual differences, individual style of thinking and functioning, and also in terms of the environment, how set of things come together or how set of things can come at different points of time. So, how the environment also puts pressure on the individual. So, it is then one can see the stress as a kind of a characteristic of both. So, the question is they designate the external or internal causal forces as pressures or stressors, and the resulting state of the organism is the stress. So, the pressures could be many from within the individual. There are some people by personality they get agitated, they are much more emotional. Some people can take many tasks at a time, called what people call they do the multitasking, but there are some people they get highly emotional when they have to deal with multiple things. And similarly, the external things in terms of the pressure or the stressors is the life events, where losing of the job, the death of an important person in the family or in the organization, where one has to learn some new task and get new situations. So, these are all the kinds of stressors. So, the pressures and stressors are there in the individual as well as in the environment, and the resulting state of the organism, the individual experiences, is what could be called as stress. So, it is the stress is the non-specific response of the body. So, that means you are not really talking about which kind of stress really, but you are all the time you are reacting to the stress and stress prone situations, and there is a kind of a generic situation within the body to meet any of those demands placed upon and to adapt to the demanding situations. So, it produces that kind of a pleasure or pain within the system. So, it is the stress is, you can't relate only to the stressor. So, each stressor comes, but you can't say this stress can be attributed, but stress is a kind of a non-specific response. Very rarely you can link to the nature of stressor or nature of pressure one has on the job to a particular stress experience. Coping, yes, sometimes the coping can be related to the nature of stressors. Let us look at the nature of stress. The physiologically, stress is the body's reaction to the perceived threat, which requires either fight or flight in a stressful situation. So in other words, you suddenly, you may see snake. So then well before you think of what is to be done, so there is the body reaction. I think the body generates that extra energy in the person. Suddenly the adrenaline levels are high. So the physiologically the stress is the body's reaction to a perceived stimuli, perceived threat. So which requires either fight or flight. So you may run from the situation or you may go and attack and correct it, but they both demands an extra energy. So that's what is happening in a stressful situation. So then the stress is anything that changes our physical, emotional or mental state while encountering various stimuli in our environment. So people also see the stress is something which could be seen as a kind of a response of in terms of the changes physiologically, physical, emotional, where the person gets into a fit, a rage, and there is a kind of a mental state while encountering the situations or the kind of a stimuli in the environment. So the question is, generally the stress is seen as negative. It is seen as negative because it contributes to that kind of a breakdown. It contributes for that inaction of the individual, and most of the time it puts that kind of a pressure. But so the nature of stress has been put into two categories. There is a eustress and the kind of a distress. Eustress is seen as positive stress that accompanies achievement and exhilaration. So people do take this kind of a physiological stress as a part of the exercise. If you go and see somebody working on aerobics, no doubt they are finding it very difficult. It is stress prone. People stretch, and they enjoy that kind of a stretch. So these are basically could be called as a kind of a positive stress. The eustress is the stress of meeting challenges, right? So that is a word, that stretch. So that means you will see how much I can do. So that is, and also it happens in the managerial jobs or in physical activities. People try and do more and more and more. For anyone else outside, it is tough to handle. And anybody else can think, okay, somebody will have a breakdown in your situation. But the person who is involved, the person who thinks that he is enjoying the task and enjoying the situation, not having the task, not having the activities could become a very stress prone situation. So that is how just doing the work itself or doing more work itself cannot be perceived as a stress prone situation. But here that more work, more variety of work, more demanding work, more challenging work that individual is trying to enjoy. So the eustress is that stress of meeting those challenges, and once people meet those challenges, they also understand their limits, and then they have enough resources to cope with those demanding situations. So the eustress build that kind of a positive view of what one is capable of, what one can stretch. But when a stress makes us cope with it, there is a feeling of satisfaction and joy in a positive mood. And that is how the eustress makes us cope with them and culminate in what people call it as a kind of a better integration of our personality. So you feel good about it, you feel great about yourself, you think that you have enjoyed the task, you have also contributed, you have made a difference, but no doubt. So people then articulate it in different ways, and people are working so hard in a tsunami kind of a situation, or when people donate blood, but they also work day in and day out depending on the kind of crisis situation what is being faced by the others. It is no doubt stress, people lose sleep, but they feel good about themselves because they are also contributing. So I think that's the positive aspect of the stress. But there is also another side, is the distress. Distress is when people feel too much or too little pressure or tension. So the work overload or work underload both can bring this kind of a pressure and tension. And distress refers to the effects of stress with long term negative impact. So it has that means it accumulates in terms of the feeling, in terms of the disappointments, and then it shows up in different ways. So that there is a long term negative impact, and distress may appear either when stresses are too strong or moderately strong, too weak but frequent. So there is, when people are exposed to the similar situations which they don't like, which also produces a degree of helplessness in the individual, that they are not in a position to define the situation, that they are not in a position to control their own reactions. I think that is the time where the individual feels extreme degree of distress. So one can view stress and de-stress as both as a kind of a positive as well as the negative. So question is whether a certain stress will turn into distress, and to what extent depends greatly on one's own physical and mental resistance. So if somebody asks, okay, up to what time I can take this stress? Do you think that I will have a breakdown at a later point of time? So nobody can really can say, but definitely one can see up to a point, yes, you will be enjoying, and then it will start showing some cracks here and there. So there is a physical and mental resistance for each individual, and then it is so different from one individual to the other, and that is how some people are able to sit and smile in a very, very difficult situation, and there are some people who just want to run away from it, and there are people who can't even think about those situations. So the people basically differ in terms of the experiences, in terms of what they can do, and also they react to the stress of not only themselves but also to the others. So the individual differences is an important aspect to be considered when somebody is talking about the stress. One can also think in terms of the acute stress. Acute stress is the at different points of time what one would experience, but then you will also see the stress can be acute as well as chronic. Sometimes you have the same stress for over a period of time. So acute stress is the result of short term stressors. So that means what we have seen could be a kind of any maybe a death or loss of the spouse, or it is the loss of job. So many of these things which happens at a point of time, but there is an intense experience, there is an intense feeling, there is an intense helplessness with the person. But then one can also see what needs to be done when you see the acute stress, but it is also in terms of the intensity, right? It is intense but for a short duration, and then it will disappear quickly. So that is how we know some stresses, even though it is very acute, and that day, that particular moment, that individual would feel now it is the end of the world. But end of the world feeling will be there for a few days or a few moments, and then the individual is able to think about it, do something about it. So it disappears quickly. So the acute stress can be very exciting, invigorating in kind of a small doses, but too much is exhausting. So you must see the intensity of the stress, how much it comes. Sometimes it is really the person is drained out, person is not able to react, person is not able to state anything when they experience that kind of a shocks. So the acute stress talks about those stress which gives that kind of a momentary shock to the individual, builds that kind of an incapability to handle that particular situation. The stress is also additive. So that means when we are talking about the stressors, each new and persistent stressor adds on to an individual stress level. So that is how you see when, for example, people leave the house, but morning there are many situations in the house, maybe no water, no electricity, or no breakfast, or vehicle won't start. So there could be many of these things when you before you leave the house. So then you get onto the road. So when you get onto the road, then you see every light is showing you the red. So now each time when you see the red light, you are reacting to it, right? So it is, so whatever has you have built it, so now it builds further as you are going. Then as you reach the office, no parking place. Then these a few more things will happen. But somebody whom you think should have told you good morning may not say good morning. That's the time where you are into a boiling point. So people use these things. Each of these adds to one's own stress levels. And then finally, when you sit on the job and something comes, so suddenly you have you may shout at the other person, or you may react in an most inappropriate manner, but normally you are not like that, but it is a stress prone reaction. I think people think something abnormal, something wrong, I think, but then there is an accumulated thing over a period of time, not necessarily on the same day, at different points of time, but people do keep all these things in them. So another important fact about the stress is that it does not necessarily follow from a stressor. So it is not that one and then you react in some fashion kind of a thing and it is over. No. The stress and the stress reactions are additive in a sense. It keeps on adding, and then depending on the individual how much you are able to forget and build a new story, or you carry those old things in your mind, and then you move from one to the other levels. So there are many who have talked about, and particularly the hands, there are 3 stages of stress. So there is an alarm reaction. Under this stage, an initial shock phase and of lowered resistance is followed by a counter shock. So that is the body reacts, and then for something, then immediately you get activated, then you want to take care of the situation. So this is one where you see that kind of an immediate kind of a jerk reactions. Then resistance, it is a stage of maximum adaptation when the individual restores the equilibrium. You come back and then see the situation of what could be done, but then there is an exhaustion. So if the stressor continues, and so now you see your defense mechanisms are not able to cope with, and this is the stage where you move to this exhaustion, that is, you are not in a position to deal with. Let's look at people have studied, we can elaborate on this, but see the symptoms of stress. Symptoms of stress are physical symptoms, mental symptoms, the symptoms and the behavioral symptoms, and then one can also see the emotional symptoms. The physical symptoms may include many things, the sleep pattern changes. That means as you go to the bed, you are not able to sleep for a few hours. So you have fought with somebody, or someone has shouted at you, or it is the arguments in the workplace, or you have so much work, even when you go to the bed, you are only seeing your files, what you should have cleared. So there is a sleep pattern changes, so that means it takes some time for you to, as you go to the bed, it may take a couple of hours, maybe more hours to sleep. Otherwise, you would have slept as you go to the bed. So sleep pattern changes are there. And similarly, when you get up in the morning, you may feel that kind of an exhaustion. Fatigue is another thing where people feel all the time, yes, I'm not able to do much, and then you're feeling that continuous, that exhaustion and the not able to react. So the fatigue is another thing. The digestion changes are there. Suddenly you are not able to eat, because now even though food is there, it's not going to be, it's not so tasty. So you are not able to eat, or you may eat so quickly so that you want to run. So then the digestion changes are there. You feel suddenly the loss of appetite and kind of a thing. Then dizziness is that suddenly you feel hold on kind of a thing, and then the fainting. So people also collapse, or sweating and trembling. So they very clearly, when people are asked to go on make a speech, first time when you have to do that, you're completely your body is reacting to that, sweating, and when they hold the mic, you've seen the trembling. So that is kind of an initial, the body is trying to cope with that kind of a stress situation. The tingling hands and the feet, so it is many people experience that, either sweating hands or some cold hands, cold feet. So suddenly you are not in a position to react, you are not in a position to speak, you are not in a position to see the crowd before you, and all these are part of that kind of a physical symptoms. It is not exhaustive listing, but some illustrative listing. Similarly, there are mental symptoms may include the following things. One of the things is that lack of concentration, that you are not able to say what you want to say. You are not able to focus on, and then suddenly the memory lapses. You start thinking about what is that I was saying. So when you are thinking about it, then your memory lapses. You are not able to quote and give that kind of a cross references, or which you have read and you are talking to the group. So suddenly you think that you are not able to recover from that loss of memory. And then similarly, the difficulty in making decisions. So suddenly that you think of many alternatives, but each of the alternative pose a kind of a big problem. Not so you just want to hold on, confusion. So when people are in stress, they open some chat, they read some numbers, but obviously they really don't know what is that they are looking for, address or the telephone number, name or something. So there is so much of confusion, people get into that kind of a stress. You have seen that kind of a mental reactions when people are sometimes in the bus stations or in the airport or kind of a thing. They think that already they are late, and then their documents are not organized properly, and then when they read, they are not in a position to read, and they read something else. So confusions of that nature, where under the stress they may read some number as something else. So there is a disorientation of what is to be done, where I am going, or what is that I should do, and also some kind of a panic reactions or panic attacks. So suddenly people get disturbed, they may drop something, they may sit in a place, many of these things. One can also see a behavioral symptoms. Behavioral symptoms may include, as we talked about the sleep related thing, there are appetite changes. So people eat too much or too little. So suddenly people gain weight when they are under the very severe stress situations. And you are also seeing that kind of an eating disorders. So anorexia is a kind of where the people don't eat, and then there is increased smoking, restlessness. So it is they are not able to stand in one place, not able to concentrate, nail biting, fidgeting. These are all the kinds of things what one can see. So as the person is moving continuously from one to the other, so then you ask, what is the problem? Do you have stress? So you can see based on some of those behavioral symptoms. And particularly when people don't eat properly, and then they say that no, I'm very, very hungry, or I don't have a appetite at all, not able to sleep, or this kind of a nail biting. So many of these things do give that kind of a behavioral symptoms of the individual under stress prone situations. I think one should also separate this as these emotional symptoms. Emotional symptoms may include bouts of depression. So people go through this. They don't want to get out of the bed. They sit in one place continuously. They don't like to talk to anyone. They don't like to react to anything, or otherwise a kind of an impatience. They don't want to wait for anything. So then they shout at the other person. They demand things. Then fits of rage, or sometimes they go to the level of crying. So suddenly they have breakdowns, and also the deterioration of personal hygiene and appearance. So that means they don't care for anyone else. So they dress in a very awkward manner, and also they appear. So that is the personal grooming and the personal appearance is, you will see that the individual is having some kind of a problem. So people may not take bath. So to many things which you will see that there is a personal hygiene issues. So the emotional symptoms is one of not caring, and this non-caring coming out of that kind of a depression or internal disturbances making them to react to the other person in a very sharp fashion, and sometimes they may also enjoy this kind of a sharp reactions to the other. So the emotional symptoms also talks about at some level. So the Robert Yerkes and John Dodson's first described the relationship between stress and performance way back and the 1908, but there are several studies, and the principle what they talked about is that at a certain point a specific amount of stress is healthy. So that means some level of stress is always good. Otherwise, if there is no stress of the examination, people don't prepare. They don't read. They will not do that kind of the homework or repetition and then understanding and application. Many of these things one will not do if there is no stress. So that means stress is healthy. That threat is useful and sometimes even beneficial for the individual to see. But then that means you have to see how to create this required amount of stress which is positive. So usefulness can be translated only into performance, but also into one's health and well-being. So that means people do get excited around this new stress. But then what we are talking about is good performance. So in this model you can see, right, the poor, moderate and high. Also you will see the poor performance, and there is also a poor performance at the end in the circle. And then you are also seeing the performance and illness. So on the one side illness is high and the illness is low. So up to some point you will see that the curve is moving. So there is a maximum performance, but then moderate, optimally aroused kind of an individual, and then there is a positive stress. But then you start seeing the distress coming in, and then as that stress increases, it affects that kind of a performance. And the highest level you will see the performance breakdowns and the disorganization of the personality, and also not able to cope with the situation. So then what you are trying to see essentially is that what can be classified the stressors as external as well as internal. So the types of stressors are broadly classified, and then one can elaborate on this. So the external stressors, as we know, include the physical environment, the social interactions, set of things happening at the organizational level. Then there are major life events and also the daily hassles of reaching the workplace, daily hassles of meeting all the basic requirements. Look at each of the external stressors, and then one can always see what impact it has. Similarly, the lifestyle choices. Sometimes it is the what is that you want to pursue, and negative self-talk, the mind traps, as well as some of these personality traits. So, as we are seeing this, that how to look at this and how to eliminate the stressor becomes very important. That is where we will see these external stressors again. When you see the external stresses again, there is this physical environment. So, when you see the working conditions in the organization, some are very noisy kind of an environment, whether it in a machine shop, then you can also see there is so much of not only noise but also dust and heat. So, these are all pretty exhaustive kind of a thing. Then you also have the social interaction, where there are supporting colleagues is there, it is good, but non-supporting colleagues, where you have to do most of the things yourself, not enough opportunity to interact and share with anything, and the organizational pressures on the individual. So, these are like typically the external things, physical, social and organizational reasons. And then you have the major life events. So, the life events which can come at some point of time when we lose parents. That is how what people call as the midlife kind of a crisis. In a midlife crisis, external stressor as well as the internal stressors are at a very, very high level, and that is how people have heart attacks. People have that kind of a breakdowns. In a midlife crisis, what all the things will happen? If you see, that the individual has worked in the organization for some period of time, usually 15 years to 20 years. So, no more somebody is going to guide you, about what is good, what is bad in the organization. You have to prove yourself to the others. At the same time, many youngsters would be talking different things and the new things. So, you get challenged from the youngsters, and the organization will be demanding much more. Look, I have taken care of you for 10-15 years, now you give much more. So, the organization is also demanding, now they are investing less in your development, less in your learning, but they are more demanding in terms of deliverables and the contribution. This is what happens in the organization. But the life events, if you see, then there are changes. Changes for the spouse level. You have lived with the spouse for 15 years. You are not getting the same excitement, same care kind of a thing what you used to get. And similarly, the kids, they will reach that kind of in a middle age, they reach the teenagers, and usually they react to the mid-level person like you don't know how to speak, you don't know how to stand, and you don't know how to dress, things like that. And if you pick a dress for your teenage daughter or son, then they say you don't know how to select any dress, you don't have any more color sense, or you don't have any fashion sense. So, many of these reactions can come from your own close kith and kin. Then that is the time where the individual also loses one or more parents. And when you see these life events, if it all starts coming at the same time, which people have marked around 38, 39, sometimes goes up to like 45, 46. So, if all of these things happen at the same time, then the individual is under great stress. So, that is where the physical environment, the social interaction, the organizational life events, if all gets added to that kind of a daily hassles, where you have to make decisions, you have tough union situations, or you have tough subordinates, or you also get into the where you have not made your own assets, so which can cause that you have to go for a new building or a new house. Many of these things will add and then create that kind of a stressor on the individual. So, these are all this kind of an external stressors. And we have also talked about that internal stressors are this kind of a lifestyle choices. In the middle age, you start thinking, what is that I have done? What did I achieve for last 20, 30 years, 25 years? What is that going to be my future choices? So, there are lifestyle choices people do make at this. And then lot of negative self-talk. Could be that, oh, I thought that I will become something like this, but look at me what I have become today. So people also pass negative judgments about themselves into based on that kind of a self-talk. Then also the mind traps, you are not able to think new possibilities. You think this is it kind of a thing, and also the personality traits. Some people get worked up much more. You get agitated. So these personality traits also can build that kind of a pressure where you see disappointments all around, disillusionment, and as you start seeing what people call it as that negative mindset, and that is how the solution is told that be positive or positive living. So, but personality traits wise you have adopted a kind of a negative style of seeing. So, you see only you have become what people call it as not the kind of a pessimist, and you are not at all optimistic. You see the future as bleak, and then you only see negative things around you. So, these are all the things adds to that internal stressors and building of the stress levels. So, now the question comes, where do we go about it? So, eliminating the stressor. So, as we are seeing this eliminating stressor, in some cases the easiest way to manage stress is to avoid it. So, can we avoid it? Can we eliminate it? I think this is an important question, but most obvious choice is that neither you can eliminate nor you can avoid it. I think that is where the stress has been seen as a part of the life. So, all stresses cannot and should not be avoided. I think this is a nice statement to make, but basically that one has no choice. So, that is where you see these stresses can be eliminated psychologically by changing the meaning of the situation. So, sometimes you may see, yes, whatever is happening, it is happening for the good. Whatever is happening, I think someday will come. So, people do try and make sure they try and give that kind of a view. So, one need to do that kind of a reassess the seriousness of the situation. One need to see how to understand and how to cope with it. I think before we get on to the management of stress and coping with stress, let us also look at the work and the job stress. The job stress is a kind of a chronic, use this word, disease caused by the conditions at the workplace, and that negatively affect an individual's performance and our overall well-being of his body and mind. I think that is what we are talking about the job stress as. In some professions it is much more exhaustive, where people have to work continuously. People have responsibility for many things, and people deal with such situations continuously. They do have this stress, they experience this blood pressure, they have that individual breakdowns, then they become violent, they harass other people in the non-work situation. So, many of these things have been seen as a kind of this job stress. So, it is a chronic, it takes a form of a disease because that kind of a negative effect of the workplace. So, then one can also see this, one or more of a host of physical and mental illnesses manifest from this job stress. As I told you earlier, the stresses are there, but how the stress and what is the coping, it totally depends on the individual. So, in some cases the job stress can be very disabling. In chronic cases, a psychiatric consultation is usually required to validate the reason and the degree of work related stress. So, people you see that get into the alcoholism, sometimes they get into the drug abuse, sometimes they are smoking, sometimes there are maladjustments in the family. So, many of these things can be attributed to the kind of work or the job stress. So, it is to be analyzed and it is to be understood. So, the factors influencing work stress is one of the common things what we are seeing is the drive for success. So, people use this word, the cutthroat competition. So come what may, you have to do things better than the other. All the time you are comparing the perks, all the time you are talking about the what is that you will have to get. So then people work very hard. People work very hard to derive every benefits whatever in terms of what they define as success as. For success could mean somebody a house, for somebody success would mean buying a house as well as a car. Success could somebody means many things, that means people are in pursuit of that success. And then the other thing is in terms of the changing work patterns. Sometimes you are working in daytime, sometimes you are working in the night time, some you are working in for different clocks, problems of that nature. And we also talked about the working conditions, and then this overwork. Today we have seen in many of the IT companies, people do start the work, but as they go to the evening, there are many demands. They have to talk to the customer, they have to talk to the customer at different parts of the globe, understand their concerns and their language, and then they have to convert the day's task into the customer expectation. And then sometimes you have to rework it, sometimes you have to reject whatever you have done, sometimes you have to make sure that it meets the expectations of your customer. All this can be at the end of the day exhaustive. So people come and then they don't have really time to interact with the family members or anything. So overwork is one of the common things the youngsters are feeling. So unless they use their weekends properly, unless they do something about it, they find it difficult to cope with. And similarly, the underwork also is said it's a problem situation where people don't get opportunities to prove themselves and contribute and being a significant member of the organization. I think this overwork and the underwork, but you also see these uncertainty influencing where people don't understand the cause-effect relationship. What do I have to do in order to get to move up in the organizational hierarchy? Why do so? There is things when they become cutthroat in terms of the competitive things, when people don't know how to move, how to prove, how to contribute, then it causes uncertainty. So people are not in a position to react when the mixed signals comes from the bosses or from the organization. Also we have seen conflict, where the individual experiences the conflict with respect to their own roles, and there is a problem what people have talked about, the self-role distance. So the individual feels that I should not be doing this kind of a work, or I am too much or more qualified to do this. So things like that also they contributes to the conflict, role conflict, particularly the self-role distance, role ambiguity, and these things do relate to that kind of a stress reactions. Then we have also seen the responsibility. So the too much of workload, and people feel that they have to be coping with, or they have a very high risk what they are facing on the job. So responsibility where somebody has to handle cash in the bank, and by chance there is some cash is missing, that kind of a perception could result in feeling of that stress. And also the relationships at work, and also the change at work, where the persons are different age groups, but some age group people are comfortable to cope with the change. There are some situations where you would like people resist the change. So resistance to change, inability to cope with the change, all will become part of that work stress. So the signs of stress at the workplace can be seen, some at the arousal stage, where persistent irritability, anxiety kind of a thing, where you don't get that kind of a proper picture of what is going to happen, and then you always get negative about the things happening around you. I think I should not be here. I can't tolerate this person. See these kinds of reactions, and then what these people are up to. Can they discuss openly and discuss? And So okay, can they open up? So all these are part of that kind of an anxiety. You also have this insomnia. So you, as we talked about that, your forgetfulness, sleeplessness, they're not able to eat, not able to concentrate. These are all clear signs of stress at the workplace. So you will also see that people are not in a position to sit in one place, absenteeism, or also the tardiness in work, so that they are not in a position to start the work at all. As soon as they open the accounts book, then he tries to do things but closes, and then then waits for some more things. So people want to read some manuals of the organization, as they open the manuals but not able to continue. So there is a tardiness. They touch the tool, but yes, because he is not liking the work. So and also tired and fatigue, for no reason. So the morning itself they are exhausted, so they are not in a position to concentrate. So they think when the things are going to come to a close. And also people doing this kind of a procrastination, and then that indecision. Procrastination is a kind of a daydreaming. So you are all the thing, I will do that, I will do this, I am more capable of handling all that. So it's a kind of a daydreaming. And also the social withdrawal with cynicism. You all the time you think nothing is going to happen in the organization. Organization is going to dogs. So people talking about that, and when responsibilities are given, you reject and refuse to do things. Resentful, indifferent, defiant, that is you are not obliging. And also you see the increased use of coffee, sometimes alcohol and tobacco, smoking. These are again set of clear symptoms of the workplace stress. So then you have the severe exhaustion stage, where the chronic sadness or depression, or the chronic mental and physical fatigue. So the organization, the workplace, you can observe these things and see what is happening, and also the chronic stress related illnesses, what people have referred to, headaches, sometimes stomachache, then bowel problems. Then you also see the psychological things, and isolation, where people keep themselves in a corner, withdrawal from most of the activities, non-participation, also some kind of a self-destructive thoughts, where people think, okay, I will destroy everything around me, or one's own records. So thoughts of this nature all are typical clear signs of stress. Also one can bring this stress of the external also with one's own, what we have talked about, the kind of a fear, sometimes very intermittent or sometimes very continuous. So people become anxiety prone. And then there are threats, physical threats, social threats, financial threat. One can put any number of this. Uncertainties. You don't know the connection between your cause and effect. Lack of sleep, somebody misunderstands, somebody misinterprets. And also you think, what's your position in the society if all this happens. So that is where really one has to see all these are so common, what to do about it, managing stress. So there are very many proven skills that we can use to manage stress, but these help us to remain calm, effective, particularly in high pressure situations, and help us to avoid the problems of long term stress. So the question is what that one can do. So these skills fall into three main groups. Some are action oriented skills, so in which you can seek to confront the problem causing the stress, and often changing the environment of the situation itself, try to do something about it. Or emotionally oriented skills, in which we do not have the power to change the situation, okay, but we can manage stress by changing our interpretation of the situation and the way we feel about it. So that means we think, okay, there are good things and the bad things in the life. Okay, as I have seen good things, the bad things also have come, stress is there, but it is not going to last long. So you may interpret it that way. Or okay, I have enjoyed, so let me take this stress also and then work through that. So taking the stress in a positive way and then see how you can deal with it. And also these acceptance oriented skills, where something has happened over which we have no power and no emotional control. So where our focus must be. So then be on surviving the stress. So people, okay, let me take it and then work through. So acceptance oriented skills. So the broadly what we have seen in this lecture is we have seen the following concepts: the concept and definition of stress, the nature of stress and the different stages of stress, symptoms of stress and the types of stressors, eliminating the stressor, some basic principle of Yerkes-Dodson, job work stress, the managing stress. And with this understanding, we will also talk in our next lecture about the techniques of managing stress, coping with stress at organizational level, also coping with stress at the individual level, and also we will talk about Lazarus' way of dealing the stressful circumstances.